The Moline Plow Company reunion brings together collectors of all Moline plow equipment and features the Moline-Universal Tractor for us to see. It takes a special person to have the passion to restore and preserve what is over 100 years old. And because of its age, much of this equipment is now rare. This slide program is a reflection on a fascinating period of farming history from 1866 to 1923. Moline Plow Company was incorporated in 1870, and this time period began the boom of industrializing farm technology. Farmers and new immigrants were attracted to the West as land opened up. The soils were different than out east, and the native prairie was a challenge. The cast iron and wooden plows needed to be cleaned often and were not strong enough to be pulled by teams of horses. Many historians credit John Deere with the invention of the steel plow in 1837, with the use of a plowshare made from a polished steel saw blade. He handmade them for local farmers. By 1843, he had sold 400, and he moved to Moline, where he could get materials by rail. 14 years later, in 1857, he was selling 10,000 plows per year. As large migrations of people moved west, the demand for farming equipment grew. The early 1860s witnessed a dramatic change from hand power to horses, which historians characterize as the first American agricultural revolution. In 1860, farmers made up 50% of the labor force, and there were just over 2 million farms, with an average acres of 199. Now came the American Civil War in 1861 that lasted over 4 years until 1865. And over 1 million casualties, including soldiers, civilians, and slaves. It was a real blow to the labor force, as farming was labor-intensive. With the 1862 Homestead Act, the federal government issued 160-acre tracts virtually free to about 400,000 families who resided on and cultivated the land for 5 years. Also in 1862 was the Pacific Railroad Act. Railroads received 400-foot right-of-ways plus 10 square miles of land for every mile of track that they built. Even larger numbers of families purchased lands at very low interest from the new railroads, which were trying to create markets. The railroads advertised heavily in Europe and brought over at low fares hundreds of thousands of farmers from Germany, Scandinavia, and Britain. A dramatic expansion of farming was about to take place. The number of farms tripled from 2 million in 1860 to 6 million by 1905, and the number of people living on farms grew from about 10 million in 1860 to 22 million in 1880 and then to 31 million in 1905. Farm families were settling and able to market surpluses. The demand for equipment was strong. Plow technology had continued to improve, and gang plows were being introduced. A farmer using a walking plow could till 1 to 1.5 acres a day, but with a gang plow, he could do about 5.5. The Civil War had ended in 1865, and with business booming, it was not surprising for competitors such as Candy, Swan and Company, that had been making fanning mills and hay racks, to set up their shop in Moline in 1866 to challenge Deere with their own Moline plow. Candy, Swan and Company incorporated in 1870 as Moline Plow Company. John Deere had incorporated in 1868 as Deere & Company. George Stevens had a sawmill on what is now Arsenal Island and was put out of business when the government took over the island during the Civil War. He became a partner of Candy and Swan and provided much of the financing of the newly formed Moline Plow Company. Between 1870 and 1880, there were 1.4 million new farms and a push to decrease labor costs. It was the age of industrializing farm technology. Demand exceeded the local blacksmith shops, and factories and marketing sprang at the opportunity. By the late 1870s, the company had a full line of walking and riding plows, walking and riding cultivators, and the usual discs, harrows, and other basic implements of the day. They were manufacturing 50,000 plows and 20,000 cultivators annually, with 400 employees. In 1884, the Moline Plow Company introduced the Flying Dutchman three-wheel sulky plow, which claimed to revolutionize the sulky plow business the world over. Previous to that time, sulky plows had been of the two-wheel variety. The Flying Dutchman captivated farmers who wanted the best plowing done with the greatest ease for themselves and teams. The team is hitched the same as to a walking plow. It's easy on the team because there's absolutely no weight on the horses' necks. The plow is in front of the driver, where its work is always under the driver's eye. The front furrow wheel is a gauge and support, ensuring uniform depth when crossing dead furrows or ditches. It can turn a square corner and be backed like a cart. The Flying Dutchman figure, shown enlightening the world, appeared in nearly all publications and became an admired mascot of the company. Operating the plow was easy and simple. It had the lightest draft of any plow ever made at the time. The Champion corn planter can be used for checking, drilling, or hand dropping. The dropper plates are turned by a sprocket chain from the main wheel axle, and valves at the heel of the runners trip the corn for the hill into the trench by action of the wire on the check fork. The dropping is less affected by variable travel of the team than any other planter. Now becoming somewhat famous, an 18-foot statue of the Flying Dutchman was at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago to adorn a display of equipment. What could have been the inspiration for the Flying Dutchman figure? The newly proposed Statue of Liberty was certainly getting a lot of press. The inscription, "Liberty Enlightening the World," had been used. The figure holding a torch is a robed Roman Liberty goddess holding a tablet symbolic of the Declaration of Independence. So we see a few similarities, at least in the raised arm holding the ear of corn radiating the light, and the Moline Plow Company logo is etched into the stump. We take the liberty of enlightening the world in regard to the superior implements of our manufacture, especially the greatest of all plows, the Flying Dutchman. Here is the explanation from Moline Plow. Having read the story of the Flying Dutchman, the mysterious phantom ship which was the terror of the seas, we invite your attention to another Flying Dutchman, quite as invincible on land as the phantom ship was on water. The three-wheeled sulky plow known as the Flying Dutchman has been flying over the country with full sails since its first general introduction in the spring of 1884. The appearance of this plow in any farming community was the omen of dire misfortune to any other sulk plow, for none could encounter the Flying Dutchman without being plowed under. According to the old sea legend, the phantom ship plowed the seas against the heaviest wind, and it is a remarkable fact that where the adversaries of the Flying Dutchman sulk plow have done their loudest blowing against the plow that took the wind out of their sails, is where the Flying Dutchman has scored its greatest triumphs and has secured a monopoly of the sulk plow trade. To put our timeline in perspective, it is now 1903 when the Wright brothers achieved powered flight. Gasoline engine technology had recently advanced to where its use in airplanes was feasible. Oh, a gasoline engine? Now that's something to keep in mind. Moving on in our timeline to 1906. Moline Plow has been in business for 40 years, and the number of farms has tripled while Moline Plow has been in business. The chart shows a dramatic expansion of farming over these years, and the duration of Moline plow in yellow. There are other world events in modernization that are rapidly advancing. The Moline-Universal Tractor introduction is still 10 years into the future. It is now 1908 when Henry Ford introduced the Model T. Who knew over its lifetime that Ford would sell 15 million by 1927 just in the United States? Mass production on moving assembly lines and using interchangeable parts set a new standard for industry. With his methods, the price of the touring model in 1908 at $850 would ultimately be lowered to $300 by 1925. This 1909 buyer's guide shows how broad the product line had become of plows, harrows, planters, cultivators, seeders, and wagons used for a great variety of crops and farm work. Acquisitions of other companies had been made, such as Mant wagons, Henny buggies, Adriance harvesting equipment, Monitor drills, and McDonald scales to really round out the line. In other world events, World War I breaks out in Europe in 1914. The United States, despite remaining neutral until 1917 and not engaging in any major combat until 1918, helped end the 4-year global conflict and emerged from it as a major world power. The U.S. in World War I was a critical supplier to other Allied nations, as millions of European farmers were in the Army. The rapid expansion of farms, coupled with the diffusion of trucks and Model T cars and the tractor, allowed the agricultural market to expand to unprecedented size. During the war, prices shot up, and farmers borrowed heavily to buy out their neighbors and expand their holdings. The war had created an atmosphere of high prices for agricultural products as European nations' demand for exports surged. Farmers had enjoyed a period of prosperity as the U.S. farm production expanded rapidly to fill the gap left as European belligerents found themselves unable to produce enough food. The war ended in 1918, 4 months after the Moline-Universal Model D was introduced. The stage is now set to drop back and pick up with the expansion of Moline Plow Company in 1913. In 1913, the Moline Plow Company was thinking tractors. In 1915, patent rights were acquired for the Universal Tractor Company's Cultiplow motor cultivator. Moline Plow had already been building implements for it, and they sold it for a short time as the Moline-Universal Model A. 2 Moline Plow revisions followed in 1916 and 1917. Both were 2-cylinder opposed engines, and this is the 1917 Model C. This 4-cylinder Model D was a major redesign, introduced in July of 1918. This was the most revolutionary model and was the one mass-produced for the following 5 years. Production of the Model D began in Rock Island in what Moline Plow claimed as the world's largest tractor factory. Quite amazing that they were able to construct and tool up a factory of this size so quickly. Here we see a number of Model D 4-cylinder power chassis assembled, primed, and ready for a good coat of paint. The warehouse was filled with Moline-Universal tractors ready for shipping. Moline Plow had agents across North America and internationally. Aggressive production numbers give reasons for the size of the factory, but it's amazing growth when considering ordering and distribution methods 100 years ago. The thrust of Moline Plow's marketing in 1918 and 1920 was a new way of farming. This is what they said. Thousands of farmers all over the country are farming more land with less horse and man labor and making more money than ever before by means of the Moline system of power farming. The scarcity of farm labor during the late World War was the epoch that marked the era of power farming. Necessity is the mother of invention, and many farmers met labor shortage with power farming. They learned that they could farm more land with less man and horse help and do it more economically. So they are still farming with power because they're making more money than ever before. The Moline-Universal Tractor plows 9 acres a day under average conditions. With the engine offset, the operator has a clear view ahead, and the tractor can run as slow as desired when cultivating small corn. While riding, the operator is in the best position to observe the quality of work being done. From 25 to 27 acres a day can be worked up with this outfit. The tractor weight of 3,380 pounds is over the wheels and available for traction, and the weight is well balanced over the wheels, so it can be supported with one hand without an implement attached. As you've seen, the engine is offset to the left. For better balance, concrete ballast is fitted into the right drive wheel to also increase traction. Here it is fitted with a 2-wheel truck, making it a 4-wheel tractor. Over 15 different implements were made to be used with the Universal. Just pull up at an angle to the new implement and swing the frame over to the new one. One person should be able to make the switch. After the switch, here now is the Moline-Universal fitted with a Moline-Universal gang plow. This operator is drilling grain and dragging in one operation, saving a lot of time. And as always, the operator is in a great position to watch the quality of the work being done. The Moline-Universal has plenty of power to pull this Moline 2-row lister planter. 2 rows of corn at a time can be cultivated with this Moline-Universal 2-row cultivator, and you can see the fine work that it does. The Moline mower will cut a 10-foot swath and 30 to 35 acres in a day. How about this? Better than horses for loading hay. It pulls steady at slow or fast speeds. And here we see the Moline-Universal Tractor has ample clearance to cultivate corn for the last time. One man handles the tractor and binder much easier than horses. This outfit is easily backed to turn on square corners. Here is the outfit harvesting a 10-foot swath so that one man can actually cut 30 to 35 acres in one day. Yes, the tractor has lights in addition to a starter, and harvesting here at night with a grain binder is going to get the work done quickly. The Universal comes equipped with a front-mounted belt pulley for doing belt work such as this threshing machine. And now it's time to harvest the corn with the Moline-Universal and the Moline corn binder. More belt work here with the Moline-Universal Tractor. It has ample power for running an ensilage cutter. Here's another implement. The limestone can be spread with the Moline lime sower. With the mounted 2-wheel truck, the Moline-Universal can be used as a 4-wheel tractor to pull other implements. Always easy to start and ready to go. It's quick to do many odd jobs with this Moline-Universal Tractor. Disking is a breeze with the Moline-Universal, and the operator is always in full control. As implements you have wear out, you can replace them with Moline tractor implements, which are stronger and built for higher speed, that do more and better work. Look at these straw piles. Here we see a large threshing crew and a threshing machine, and it's powered by, yes, a Moline-Universal. The Moline-Universal Tractor. Maybe by now you have been convinced to own one of these. Unfortunately, they're hard to find. Let's go back to the heyday of the Universal and learn what happened to Moline Plow Company. The car was now replacing the horse and buggy, and in 1915 George A. Stevens, the son of Moline Plow's original founder, George W. Stevens, founded the Stevens Motor Works as a division of Moline Plow, with full production in 1917 at a factory in Freeport, Illinois. John Willys had bought into and formed Willys Overland Motor Company in 1912. From 1912 to 1918, Willys Overland had become the second largest producer of autos next to Ford Motor. The Stevens family sold the majority of their Moline Plow Company stock to John Willys in September of 1918, and Willys planned to ramp up the highly successful tractor production. Remember that World War I had created an atmosphere of high prices for agricultural products as European nations' demand for exports surged. Farmers had enjoyed a period of real prosperity as U.S. farm production expanded rapidly to fill the gap left as Europeans found themselves unable to produce enough food. However, when the war ended in 1918, supplies increased rapidly as Europe's agricultural farming and market rebounded. Overproduction in the U.S. led to plummeting prices, which led to stagnant market conditions and living standards for farmers in the 1920s. Even worse, hundreds of thousands of farmers had taken out mortgages and loans to buy out their neighbors' property and now were unable to meet the financial burden. The cause was the collapse of land prices after the wartime bubble, when farmers used high prices to buy up neighboring farms at high prices, saddling them with heavy debts. By the 1920s, the farmers made up 27% of the labor force. In this 1919 hit song, the lyrics highlight concern that American soldiers from rural environments would not want to return to farm life after experiencing the European city life. Business was going well with Stevens Auto Works until this depression of the 1920s. Efforts failed in order to organize as an independent company, and Moline Plow ceased manufacturing the Stevens in 1924 after sales of up to 35,000 autos. In another attempt of diversification, Moline Plow built the Moline Model 10, a 1.5-ton truck, for 3 or 4 years in the early 20s. It used the same engine as the Moline-Universal, but it didn't prove to be a big seller. In early April of 1922, it was announced that Willys Overland, who at this time had owned 85% of the common shares of Moline Plow Company, was in trouble and had failed to pass a restructuring plan for the plow company. By mid-May, it was announced that Moline Plow Company had reincorporated in a sweeping financial overhaul that Willys Overland had agreed to, and it would result in a reduced stake by Willys Overland. The Moline Plow Company continued to struggle in post-war depression of the early 20s and stopped much of its production in 1923, including the Moline-Universal. After dropping the Universal, the company created a subsidiary in 1923 called Moline Implement Company that took control of the Moline properties and business. In December 1925, the original Moline Plow Company officially dissolved and its assets were merged into the Moline Implement Company. In 1926, the International Harvester Corporation purchased the now defunct tractor plant, where it began producing farmall tractors. After several years of declining sales, a merger of Moline Plow Company, and by then Moline Implement Company, was worked out with Minneapolis Steel and Machinery Company and the Minneapolis Threshing Machine Company. This merger in March 1929 resulted in the Minneapolis Moline Power Implement Company. And today, loyal Minneapolis Moline owners and others have traced their tractor roots back 100 years to the Moline Plow Company. Cheers to all the collectors who cherish and preserve these important implements that were so labor-saving for our forefathers.